like to welcome everybody today to the 2019 Wyoming Early Signing Day for football. We're excited to get this press conference kicked off and learn a little bit about this year's 2019 signing class. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to head football coach Craig Bull.
Well, what a great day, and football recruiting has certainly changed. We think the early signing period has been a great addition that the college football coaches have embraced. Everybody handles it differently. Our goal at the beginning of the year was to set out and probably sign between 23 and 24 guys. That number may increase up to 24 to 25 depending on some attrition. And so we set a couple benchmarks. Recruiting cycles started certainly actually right after signing date, and so a couple people that I think are really important to acknowledge in this class. First of all, our Director of Recruiting, Justin Mesa, who's going to come up and add some comments, and then Ian McGrew, who works in our recruiting office. Also want to say thanks to our assistant coaches who labored really hard, and their wives, spouses who kept the homes fire burning when all these coaches are gone for a great deal of time. But we're really excited about this class. The 18 players is about where we wanted to be. Sometimes you try to hit a mark one way or the other. I think if any coach says that they signed everybody they wanted to, they would be less than honest and probably could maybe move to Washington, D.C. We bang, bang. We've really set a couple targets out, which you'll look at the class and you'll see it's fairly evenly divided between offense and defense. I think it's important for us to recognize that there are some needs that we have, but we're certainly in a different place than we were 5 years ago. We were just trying to make as many hits as we could. There are certainly some areas where we still need to find a couple players, but what we've always felt like, it's always better to want something that you don't have than have something that you don't want. And so we have a line where we talk about when a guy's above the line, and we certainly have gone out and recruited those guys. So we're certainly excited about this class. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Justin. He's going to go through the class, and I'm going to come up after he goes through the class, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. So Justin, come on up.
Yeah. Thank you, Coach. Well, I think we should go ahead and get started with the big guys up front on the offensive side of the football. And we'll start out with Latrell Bible. Latrell Bible is from Washburn, Minnesota. He's a big boy now. What we initially liked about him when Coach Vegan saw him out in the spring and identified him early was his ability to come off the ball with quicks. He's a strong young man, powerful, plays with a great motor, played both ways, was definitely a leader on the team, came on his official visit with his coach, and his coach just raved about the type of kid that he was. We saw his leadership capabilities and really feel comfortable with him being one of the leaders on our offensive line for years to come. So that's Latrell Bible. Next guy we'll turn to is the tackle from Texas, Capel, Texas. I hope I got that right, Coach Beth. Well, Sean, thank you, appreciate it. Jack is a big human being. Really long arms, kind of the prototypical tackle and what you're looking for. Really athletic. Again, tough, physical, aggressive. His tape stood out in his ability to get to the second level, especially on the backside of blocks. Just recently came on his official visit with his dad. What was huge for him in recruiting was going to be fit, and that's something that we look for in all our guys, especially here in Laramie, Wyoming, is which guys are going to fit and be able to go through this process for 4 to 5 years. And so at the end of his visit, something that he expressed to us was this was the right fit for him. So we're really excited. Exceptional student, intelligent man. So again, a good leader for years to come on that offensive line. Next individual is going to be Carlos Harrison, from Carlsbad in San Diego area in California. This is a good example of a young man being identified as a prospect and continuing to get better throughout his senior year. Again, another large individual who moves really well in space, and that's what caught the eye of Coach Cooper and of Coach Fuchs as we continued to watch him through his senior year. And another guy that was on a visit this past weekend, really enjoyed being around him. Light personality, and again, the athleticism for this young man has stood out. So those are three really interesting and exciting guys that we're going to add to our offensive line this upcoming year. Next, we'll move to the wide receiver class. Devin Jennings is the first from Channelview High School in Houston, Texas. Devin is more of a prototypical Z wide receiver in a two-back system, which is going to fit really well for Coach Vegan and our offensive system moving forward. He's a guy that we identified early. Coach Grant saw him in the spring, liked what he saw athletically, and he continued to progress throughout his senior year. What you can tell as you watch the film is that this guy actually has a really good foundation of tools. And you see how he knows how to work against press. And the more and more that we watched him, the ability to go up and make plays, as you just saw, make contested catches, which is always something that we're looking for in our wide receivers, started to show up a little bit more and more outside of those tools that he had. So really excited about Devin. Next wide receiver is Alex Brown. Alex Brown is from Klein Collins, again, down in the Houston area. Really long guy. Now, this guy probably out of anybody that we watched this year has exceptional hands. This guy catches the ball really naturally. He has the ability to stretch the field. Again, another guy that can go up and make contested catches. But again, I'm going to go back to this guy and say that his ability to catch the football naturally is what really stood out to us, and it stands out on the film above a lot of people that we watched at the wide receiver position. Next guy is Isaiah Nair from Lamar High School in Arlington, Texas. He's got a little trio of wide receivers from down in Texas. And this guy, I'm going to give Coach Bath a lot of credit. He identified him at a camp down in Texas in the summer. Really good looking size, ran a 4.5 40 at the camp. And as we continued to watch him throughout his senior year, he really, out of everybody else that we watched this year, got better his senior year. And you can see on the film here is his ability to go up and make contested catches when people are, on his hip or on his back. He has great body control. And again, the size and speed ratio is something that's very unique, really an under-the-radar guy, and we're excited to have him and really lucky to have him. We'll move over to the H-back position type guys. Trayton Welch is the first guy up. He's from Buffalo, Minnesota. This is a guy that Coach Vegan identified really early in the process. Coming into his senior year, we knew that this was a guy that we might want to really pull the trigger on quickly. He shows up, he makes plays, has a great ability to run, has good body control. Again, another guy that catches the ball really well. We watched his first 2 games and knew that this was a guy that we had to have. Comes from a really good family, one of the best players in Minnesota, and we're really excited and lucky to have him there. Next guy up is Mr. Wyoming, Parker Christensen. And so every year we're going to identify the best guy in Wyoming and take him. And this is the guy that Coach Hazelton identified going into his senior year. We knew Parker was the guy that we wanted. We wanted to test him a little bit in camp and see what he was made of. He came to camp, ran really well, moved around in the drills really well. We put him on the offensive side of the ball, tested him, again, in one-on-ones and in 7-on-7 situations, and he performed really well. So before the end of the camp, we knew that this was our guy, and he committed really early on in the process. Solid family, exceptional student, and we're looking for this guy to be a cornerstone of our leadership of our program for years to come. We'll move over to the defensive side of the ball now with the defensive ends, and the first guy we'll talk about is Devon Harris from Big Lake, Minnesota. Again, a guy that we identified really early in the process. Coach Vegan doing a really good job out there. This guy has really good length. The most exceptional thing that he does is come off the ball with speed and quickness. And so he is going to be our pass rusher. And so quarterbacks are going to have to be looking out for this guy and finding out where he's lining up. And offensive coordinators are going to have to account for where this guy is at. He's a really good athlete. He'll line up on the offensive side of the ball. He has good body control. He's got good hands. And so he's just one of those athletic defensive ends, long athletic defensive ends that we've seen here for the past 4 years that have done a really good job to be really productive here for the Cowboys on the defensive side of the ball. Next guy is Jalen Pate from Chicago, Illinois, Lane Tech Institute there. This is a guy that we're going to give a lot of credit to Coach Dickert. He wasn't on our radar in the beginning, kind of flew under the radar, and Coach Dickert continuing to recruit and dig, discovered him in a bye week, got into the school, developed a relationship with the young man, developed a relationship with his parents. He came out on a visit during the season, liked what we had to offer. He's an intelligent young man, comes from a good family, plays with aggressiveness, plays with physicality, comes off the ball well, runs well, chases the ball well, has a really good motor. And actually for him, we challenged him to improve in a few things during the year, and we saw that. And so being coachable is something that we look for as well. And so he's been able to show us that he's capable of that, and we're really excited to add him to the team. Next guy is going to be the defensive tackle, Naftali Moy, Big Naf. He's a yes coach, no coach kind of guy. Big credit to Coach Haug here. This guy didn't have a lot of snaps going into his junior year. He missed junior year with an injury. Coach Haug saw him in the spring and identified him as a potential guy. And so we, hey, Coach Haug, where's his junior year film? And there was not much, but you turn on his senior year film and you see him being dominant, gets out of his stance really well, strong hands, aggressive, quick and explosive out of the stance, comes from a great family, and again, not a lot of film on this guy, but he's going to be dominant. He's going to be a disruptive force on the inside for us, so that's Naf. Move over to the secondary now. Before we start talking about the secondary, you've seen some guys be really, really productive here, and so we target our secondary. It's guys got to be intelligent, smart football players, and this is what this guy is, Keontae Glinton. He's, in addition to his athleticism, this guy is a sharp, intelligent football player, and so we identified him at a camp in the Northwest, moved around really well, ran a good time. Coach Dickert saw him in person and knew exactly that this was the guy that we needed. Had him in during his official visit, answered the questions well, was attentive, and we know that this is a guy that's going to be able to come in and I don't know if those two guys that are leaving us can be replaced, but we're optimistic that this is one of the guys that can do that with his athleticism and his intelligence. The next guy is Jerome Cooper. This is a guy that was identified by Coach Richardson in the spring. An under-the-radar guy, comes from Locke High School in Los Angeles. This is a program that's had a council football 2 years in the recent past because of numbers, but he stuck it out. He's one of those guys that didn't transfer to a bigger school, and we kind of like that. Anyways, we saw him at a camp down in Southern California. I thought his athleticism was exceptional. It was a guy that we wanted to target. We stayed on. We saw him in person. Coach Richardson developed the relationship, and a guy that really flew under the radar. He's going to be your no-star kind of guy, but we are fired up about this guy. You see the physicality on tape. You see the suddenness. He's got great ball skills, plays both ways, and he's a leader for his team that actually went to the state regionals in California. So really excited to have him. Next guy up is going to be a guy that plays our nickel position, a position that was perfected by Jalen Ortiz and Tyler Hall last few years. Actually played at the same school as Tyler Hall. When Allen was a freshman, Tyler Hall was a senior at Sarah High School. Anyway, transferred to Culver City. In most circles, this guy's going to be regarded as being undersized. But for us, his competitiveness, his athleticism, his desire to be great is what attracted us to him. We saw him at a camp. He was going up against the top players at that camp, was really competitive. Coach Bull saw him and said, this is the guy that's going to fit. We got to add this guy to our defense. He's a Cowboy. And once he knew that he was a Cowboy, he's never let up on that. Really excited to have Allen join us. Easton Gibbs, linebacker from Temecula Valley High School. This guy was the guy that we had as our second commit of the year. He's a Cowboy true and true. He came up early in the summer, saw it, loved it, been committed to us ever since. Has been a really solid guy, one of those guys you'd never have to worry about in recruiting. He came from a program who didn't win a single game the previous year, became the leader, jumped in, played quarterback, and never complained about that. And so he played the previous year as a defensive position, but this year, whatever his team needed for the success, they actually made the playoffs, won a playoff game, and so Really excited to have him. Another guy that we saw in person at camp. Coach Cooper identified him in the spring. Another guy that we saw in person and said we have to have this guy on our football team. Next linebacker would be Isaiah Abdullah from Los Angeles Wilson High School. Again, this is not a program that would typically produce Division I football athletes, but this guy is long, he's athletic, plays multiple positions. Coach Richardson identified him in the spring. We watched him play throughout his senior year. Again, another guy that developed and fit in our philosophy of watching guys their senior year throughout their senior year. So definitely a guy that's gotten better throughout his senior year. Defensive staff watched him in the middle and knew he was a guy that could fit in our defense. Moving on to the cornerback position is Caleb Robertson. Caleb Robertson is an exceptional athlete with great speed. He's the California state champ in the 300-meter hurdles. Now, he transferred over to St. Louis and Cardinal Ritter High School. He's signing. He's going back to California to go back and defend his title. Right, he's a really, really good athlete, really good coverage skills, good ball skills. You see him going both ways. Played for a really good team in St. Louis, and came out here early on in the official visit process, liked it again, knew that this was a place that he wanted to be, and we wanted him, so excited about Caleb. Last guy here, but not least, is Jordan Murray from Murrieta Valley High School. Jordan, I think you can see, you're going to be able to see here on the film, is a really big-time playmaker. He plays a lot of different positions at his school. He returns kicks, returns punts, plays wide receiver, makes big plays at wide receiver, and that was the one thing that we saw off film. We were actually watching somebody else, and his play jumped off the film. Coach Cooper developed a relationship with him. Coach Richardson also developed a relationship with him. They worked really, really well together in bringing this kid in. He came in here again, saw it, felt like this was the right place for him. He's the right fit, and we're excited to be able to use this guy at corner, okay, but also in the special teams game and see what he can do, and maybe he could give us a spark on that end. And that's the summary of our signing class. Thank you.
Well, that's a nice job by our recruiting office, and it truly is a team effort. We're really excited about this group. A couple things have added. Certainly the number of years that our staff has been there and been out in areas. We launched into a new area, the state of Texas, and we had some ties and some familiarity with Texas, and that proved to be fairly bountiful. But a couple things, I think. We as a recruiting philosophy do not get into ratings on stars and things like that. We go by our ratings, but I can tell you that the competition that we encountered in recruiting some of these guys, they had a lot of options, and so a lot of the yeses and the confirmations we believe came from, first of all, 3 consecutive winning seasons. Certainly the McMurray High Altitude Training Facility, it set us apart from a lot of our peers. And there's a real buy-in. And the other thing that really occurred was our players, our current players, really are truly our best recruiters. And so the ball's moving forward. We're certainly excited about it. It was a heck of an effort by a lot of guys. I know personally I feel like I'm rode hard and put up wet. I know our assistant coaches are as well. But this is a great capstone. Now we'll need to come up and find some more players as we go. It's interesting, everybody has asked how people have handled the early signing date. Last year in FBS, there was over, I think, 2,100 roughly players who signed early. This year, that's numbered down to 1,500. So I think everybody's trying to find exactly how to handle this. But we feel like we hit our watermark, and we're real well poised with the group that we have up there. I think some needs that we're going to continue to search for. Certainly, a quarterback is going to be important for us. I think a running back is going to be important for us. A bigger tight end will be important for us. A defensive tackle, but we're on the inside feeling really good about where we're at. We're in a great position, and so I want to say thanks once again to our assistant coaches and Justin and the recruiting office, and it really was we're really pleased with where we're at. So at this time, I'll open it up to questions from the media or anybody else who's here. So questions? Yes, Robert. Mhm.
stretch? Were there a lot of surprises, good or bad today, or did everything kind of go as
You know what, it was probably about where we thought. There's always going to be, a couple guys that commit that you go, well, I didn't know how they saw us. And then there's going to be a couple that, change their mind. But it was pretty minimal. And I think we've got a system built in place to handle the slack both ways.
Just a quick follow-up, I know you recruit Colorado really
Mhm.
well. Still time, you feel good about what
Mhm.
you're doing in Colorado.
Mhm.
Think you might get some guys, or was it just
Sure.
one of those years where maybe it's not quite as heavy as it was?
I think there's, it's going to sound like a somewhat of a boastful statement. I don't know if there's a staff that culls through the state of Colorado as more thoroughly than we do. And we certainly have done that. There's going to be some guys that we'll continue to look at and actively seek. And so some years there's going to be more players that fit the Wyoming profile than others. Even though we're going to go in the back half, I don't think you'll see us sign as many, but we're going to continue. There's a couple guys that we still have on our radar that are in the state of Colorado.
What was your most?
Go over here, I'll come back.
Coach, you talked about, looks like you went after some size and versatility on the offensive
Mhm.
side of the football. Was size of receiver and on the offensive line really important to you guys this time around?
Well, we've got a template, and certainly as we've progressed with our offense, the size and the stature is really going to be important. When Justin was going through the tape with the receivers, one thing that we were looking for is a competitive guy to go up and catch the football, and certainly size comes into play. I think we identified those guys, and you saw them come up with contested plays. And then what we also feel like is important to do, and I addressed it about in the middle of the year, to have much more of a competitive nature and guys who are going to finish things off and be competitive. And so I think we've identified that. Yes.
What were your most pressing needs coming into the early signing period that you felt like?
A couple things. We felt like we had to get some guys in particularly at the safety position. We've recruited well there, though, but when you lose two seasoned players like that, we're going to need to continue to get that. Corner was going to be an important position, defensive ends, and then two linebackers. And we feel like in the Mountain West play, a nickel was going to be important. Offensively, we felt like it was going to be critical for us to get a couple guys at that H position that could really stretch the field. And so between Traden and Christensen, we feel like we've been able to do that, and so we're certainly excited about that.
So with Parker, you guys recruited him the whole time as an H-back.
Yes.
What is he? How do you feel like he fits into that position?
Well,
Did he get a look at running back?
We don't think so. He's about 6'2". He's about 205 pounds. He runs 4.6, and he's an explosive athlete. So, between Trayton and Parker, we feel like those are guys that we're going to need to be able to do some athletic things. A couple of years ago, we had Jacob Hollister here, and Jacob was one of those guys that could really do some special things, and we feel like we can get that with those two guys. Yes, Robert.
Curious, obviously, there's still offers out there and stuff.
Mhm.
As you go into the second process, is it kind of let the dust settle and see what's out there, not necessarily start over or still continue on?
Mhm.
As you have offers too, or a little bit of both? How do you kind of approach it now?
Well, a lot's going to come about what happens today. I mean, there's going to be certain guys that felt like they were going to get signed that are not signed. There's certainly a template that we have. We're going to kind of hone in on our needs that we have, and certainly make sure we find guys that are above the line. We've already got a game plan in place that Mesa's done a really good job with, and so we'll begin to reevaluate. But there are a couple guys that we've talked to and said, okay, if this goes in the second signing period, we're going to still recruit you. And I think that comes into play on how everybody's handling this signing period. Last year I think there was an urgency, was a newness that, okay, I'm going to sign early. Now I think you're going to find more and more guys look around, and so we'll continue to recruit those guys. I think that there'll be a couple guys that will pop up, but there's not going to be a whole lion's share of guys that all of a sudden we're starting from scratch.
You mentioned defensive tackles, and
Mhm.
how pressing is that given you lost some veteran presence
Right.
in that middle?
It's always going to be important for us to build our defense with defensive tackles. We feel like with NAP we got one. We had spec'd out in our matrix to take two, and so we'll take a hard look to see if we can find one. We're encouraged by what's out there right now that we'll find one more, but I think we've hit our baseline with the exception of one. Yes.
You
guys have got some guys transferring out of the program.
Mhm.
Could you sign more than 25 and count some back, or would that do anything to affect your scholarship?
We're choosing not to do that. You know, the whole transfer game in college football, everybody perceives it differently. I think it's part of college football. We're always disappointed when some players choose to leave our program, but we always, you know, want to wish them the very best. And this is just part of the nature. I think we're probably on the low end as far as the guys that are exiting. But as far as the gamemanship, I think you're going to hit some heavy ebbs and flows, accounting forward and backwards and things like that. And so that's where we're looking at 24 to 25 guys. And, you know, for us to be at 18 right now, we feel like we're in a really good position. Yes?
Does it really signing period help, say, the schools at the Wyoming level?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can identify what you're short of after you.
Well, we think it does. I certainly think it benefits the student athlete. You know, some of these guys get badgered and they commit and decommit, and I think it also has some coaches pump the brakes as far as when they're really going to tender some offers. We feel like we've been ahead of the curve. You know, our MO is to be a little bit more methodical. Some schools will throw out just tons of offers, and they're really that's less than honest. Their approach is to say you've got an offer, and really it's just like monopoly money. It's not real. And so we go through a vetted process, and so when we make an offer, we're going to assume that young man's going to take it. And so therefore, the early signing date is really beneficial for us because, you know, the gamemanship is over. Here's an offer. Here's the paper that's coming. We want you to sign. And so we do a great deal of work, not only in the spring, but in the summer. But we work a lot in fall. And a lot of our coaches were out in person. I was out in person a lot, and so we feel like the early signing date is advantageous. It also helps cut costs. You're not running around the country babysitting and things like that. So I know some schools were disappointed with the early signing date, but it's something that is here. It's here to stay, and we feel like it's an advantage for the Wyoming Cowboys. Other questions? I will be available individually. I want to say thanks again to our assistant coaches, their wives, the recruiting office. Thanks for those who are attending today. You know what, as we build our program and we keep on stacking consistent classes together, you're going to see a departure from the ebbs and flows, and that's what we're in hopes that we have here today. So I'll be around a little bit if anybody has any questions. That concludes our press conference.